This story is one in a series about the confluence of capitalism, conservation, and cultural identity in the Mississippi River Basin. It is part of Waterlying and is sponsored by the Walton Family Foundation. 10 years ago, I climbed into a canoe and paddled onto the Mississippi River. This was a magazine assignment, one of the first big adventures in my then new career as a freelance journalist. The story was simple. I was meant to profile a river guide who took tourists out on the nation's mightiest river. Part of my curiosity was why anyone might do so. I assumed that the Mississippi was a dead river, just one big canal for the towboats. I was so shocked by how wrong I was by the incredible beauty I found out there that I spent the next decade traveling the Mississippi. At first, I was just chasing the pleasure of being able to pitch a tent on a beautiful sandbar in a landscape that felt so separate from the modern world. Eventually, though, all that wandering turned into reading and interviews, and then my first book, A Popular History of the Mississippi. I still think of myself as a clueless guy who once upon a time launched a little vessel onto a big river, but now am often asked to speak about the Mississippi, its past and its future. Over the past 2 centuries, the Mississippi has been heavily altered. Thousands of miles of concrete line its banks, preventing erosion. Levees prevent the water from reaching the river's life-giving floodplain. Locks and dams chop a flowing body into a series of stagnant lakes. The transformation of this river helped create the modern United States of America. It pushed us first toward what settlers called the frontier and then into our status as world-shaping economic supergiant. But it's become clear that the engineers did not fully understand what they were doing. A bayou of the Mississippi River Delta region in Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve near New Orleans, Louisiana. Credits Joe Ferrer Shutterstock. They thought they did, of course. My book features a series of men who claim to have enumerated every important fact connected with the various physical conditions of the river and the laws uniting them, to quote Andrew Humphreys, who in the mid-19th century led the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' first major study of the Mississippi. Humphreys decided all his calculations made him qualified to solve the problem of flooding. As it turned out, the program Humphreys pursued led to a disastrous flood in 1971 that killed perhaps 1,000 people and left hundreds of thousands stranded in fetid refugee camps. Humphreys' quote captures a common view here in America of the strange swirl of life that's been labeled nature. It's just a big set of particles and processes which, once studied and measured, can be reworked into a design of our choosing. My time on the Mississippi River has convinced me of something different. This river has a vital essence of all and desires and needs. In the same way that you can never fully understand the inner workings of another human mind, we will never fully grasp this river. There's another way to put this: the Mississippi River is alive. Perhaps we will design better engineering and have a brighter future here along this river if we acknowledge its existence as a living, willful being. Weighed down by negative news. Our Smart Bright weekly newsletter is the uplift you've been looking for. When I give talks about the river, I try to be cautious about this idea. I don't want to get too far out in front of my audience, entering some spiritual plane where others can't follow. But a few months ago, I got a heartening text from my mother. New book out, she said. The message was accompanied by a photo of a book jacket that featured a swirl of blue and green lines, a mess of meandering rivers that looped through the letters that spelled out the book's title, Is a River Alive? The book, written by the acclaimed British nature writer Robert Macfarlane, suggests an affirmative answer to that titular question. Macfarlane explores the idea that this fact of aliveness might suggest that rivers deserve legal rights too. That proposal draws on ancient concepts, indigenous wisdom in particular, which have been squeezed not always comfortably into our modern legal structures. I knew Macfarlane's book was coming, and I wondered if the idea of a river's consciousness might suddenly reach wider circulation. The fact that my mother and her 70-something-year-old friends in suburban Connecticut were discussing the idea in their book club revealed that, yes, maybe it would. New language is entering the conversation about rivers, and with it perhaps new possibilities for how we might relate to them. But what does that mean for the Mississippi? The swirls on Macfarlane's book cover are inspired by the river and by a particular set of maps that, as Macfarlane puts it, depict the river's memories, the past that it has determinedly carved through the American landscape over the past few thousand years. Otherwise, though, North America's biggest river does not figure in his narratives. A bald eagle flies above the Mississippi River as sheets of ice float along its surface. Credits David Brickler Shutterstock. As I've contemplated why that might be, I've found myself thinking about language. How we talk about a river shapes how we see it, and thus how we treat it. There are common metaphors that suggest a general intuition of the Mississippi's living essence, father of waters. Some people call this waterway. Others prefer Old Man River. Even the Corps of Engineers, which has overseen most of the river's renovations, has historically referred to the river as an enemy, a word that justified a century of aggressive engineering designed to defeat and control. Now I worry that the romantic old names are seen as just that.